Qingmei is being stubborn and wants to marry me. But in the second year of our marriage, her first love returned. Their old feelings reignited. They embraced on set and kissed in the recording studio. At night, the media caught them holding hands entering a hotel. Everyone said I must love her deeply, even tolerating the humiliation of being cheated on. They didn't know that the day after I saw the trending news, I sent out the divorce papers. The one who didn't agree was Qingmei. Later, she cried and regretted it, saying she had loved me all along. I simply replied, "But I don't love you anymore." Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. When I married Rosie Evans, we topped all the trending searches. Netizens said we were a perfect match. Childhood friends who grew up together, one becoming an award-winning actress, the other a wealthy heir. It was like a plot from a novel. Unfortunately, we weren't the main characters of a story. She always had a first love abroad, while I was just her second choice. But I liked her. I liked her for many years. When Rosie actively pursued me, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. After a year of marriage, we were loving each other. She was filming on set, and I would personally visit, bringing snacks and milk tea for the entire crew, asking the director and agent to take good care of her. When I was working overtime at the company, she would come to bring me soup. From time to time, paparazzi caught us walking hand in hand, sweetly gazing at each other and hugging. Her fans commented on Weibo, "Sister, this brother-in-law is great, we love him." Rosie smiled and replied, "I love him too." Just when I was overjoyed, thinking she had truly fallen in love with me, her first love returned. Neil Williams' return to the country was trending all over the internet. But the comments were full of negative reviews. He debuted with the label of a rich second generation, with countless fans, but the media dug up that his parents not only built unfinished buildings but also committed tax evasion. Later, when the matter was exposed, the entire internet condemned him. He announced he was going abroad for further studies. Anyone with a discerning eye could see he was trying to avoid his parents' downfall. After all, his parents had already gone to prison. In an instant, his reputation plummeted, with only his die-hard fans still supporting him. But I didn't expect that just after he announced his return to the country, I would see him at Rosie's filming location. There were many people on set, and Neil stood right in the center of the crowd. He wore faded clothes. His hair was messy, his face pale as if a gust of wind could knock him over, and his eyes were slightly red. "Can't you give me a chance? I really need this role." Neil said softly, "I really have no other options, director. Please give me a job. Even a small role would be fine. Otherwise, I'll be on the streets." I held the chicken soup I had made, locking eyes with him. His dark eyes sparkled with unusual colors, and he awkwardly turned his face away. The overweight director looked impatient and pushed him aside. "Aren't you making it hard for me? The shoot has been going on for 3 months. There are no roles available. Everything has already been decided. Go away. Get lost." Neil fell to the ground, his eyes redder, his handsome features clouded with mist, looking incredibly fragile. The chicken soup in my hands suddenly felt unbearably heavy. A bad premonition rose in my heart. Soon, the premonition was confirmed. Rosie stood at the door with a cold expression, not knowing how much she had heard. Her gaze towards the overweight director was icy. She hurriedly ran out of the filming studio, bumping into me as she passed, not sparing me a glance. Her heart and eyes filled with Neil, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just collided with her husband of 1 year. I watched helplessly as Rosie threw herself into Neil's arms, her eyes slightly red but revealing a sweet smile. "You're finally back, Neil." She gave the director a hard slap and sternly said, "Who gave you the courage to treat him like that?" Looking at Neil, her eyes suddenly softened. "I thought you would never come back." The two embraced passionately in front of everyone. All eyes turned to me with pity. The whole world knew Neil was her first love. I tightened my grip on the thermos in my hand. Last night, Rosie had leaned in my arms, arrogantly saying, "I haven't had your chicken soup in a long time. Come to the set and bring me some tomorrow." So today, I postponed all my work and spent hours making chicken soup to bring to her. But she didn't even look at me. Rosie, following everyone's gaze, finally noticed me. Her face suddenly turned pale. Her lips moved. "Calvin Joan." She instinctively walked towards me. Neil gently tugged at her hand. Without much force, Rosie stopped in her tracks. He had just twisted his ankle, and his handsome features showed signs of pain. "Rosie!" Rosie's heart instantly ached. She hurriedly threw out a, "I'll explain later," and turned without looking back, taking Neil to the hospital, not glancing at me again. It was Neil who shot me a provocative look. He mouthed the words, "You lost." I felt pale, my body swaying as I struggled to maintain my dignity under the sympathetic gazes of everyone around. Her white moonlight had returned. Rosie abandoned me. It was a week before Neil returned to the country. I received a phone call. After a long pause, no one spoke. I could only hear breathing. I was about to hang up when I heard, "Calvin Joan, I'm going back to the country." Neil's voice was hoarse, laced with provocation. "Do you believe that if I just beckon with my finger, Rosie will choose me?" At that moment, I didn't believe him. I knew Neil was her white moonlight. They had fallen in love in college and shared a long period of sweetness. But just a few days ago, Rosie was still curled up in my arms, her tone gentle and affectionate. "After I finish this current project, let's have a child. I want a child that looks like us." A wave of tenderness washed over me. Rosie repeatedly said she loved me, and we promised to be together for a lifetime. Naturally, I believed my wife. I kept a blank expression and coldly mocked Neil. "Is this how bold the male third party is nowadays? I'm already married to her. You two are ancient history, you should have some shame." Neil chuckled lightly, dripping with disdain. "Then let's wait and see." But now, thinking back to that trust one had in Rosie, it felt like a slap to my face. It stung fiercely. For 3 whole days, Rosie stayed in the hospital with Neil, who had only a mild ankle sprain. They didn't bother to hide their whereabouts, and the gossip media caught wind of it. In those 3 days, their photos spread across the internet. In the pictures, the man looked handsome yet thin, wearing an oversized hospital gown, gazing at Rosie with deep sorrow. Rosie's eyes were filled with the joy of having him back. In the paparazzi photos, they shared a deep gaze in the hospital room, exchanging a knowing smile. It was as if, in each other's eyes, they saw their entire world. "If only I weren't Rosie Evans' husband." Neil posted a suggestive Weibo update. "After all the twists and turns, we still end up with each other." His fans came back to life, eagerly shipping the couple. "Our good son and good daughter finally reunited." Indeed, the power of the white moonlight is unmatched. Just standing there is enough. I, the legitimate husband, became the target of their mockery. What does it matter if Calvin Joan is a wealthy CEO? Rosie doesn't love him. How can he compare to Neil? Only the unloved can be the third party, okay? Long live true love. Am I the only one who thinks Calvin Joan is terrible? He doesn't hold a candle to our brother. More and more people flooded into my Weibo comments, questioning when I would let Rosie and Neil be together. Rosie's rational fans tried to advise her, "You're really hungry, eating everything in sight. Your brother-in-law is such a good man. It's still not too late to part ways with the legal family. Don't go crazy. There's not a single good person in the Williams family. Once you get involved, you won't be able to shake it off." Rosie paid no attention to these comments. She was busy taking care of Neil in the hospital. Neil, who had merely sprained his ankle, looked as if he were terminally ill, needing to stay in the hospital forever. For an entire week, she didn't call me or send a single message. The messages I sent her fell into a bottomless pit, with no response at all. I stared blankly at the photos delivered by my secretary, which were bought out by Rosie's agent to prevent them from being leaked. My fingers trembled. The thin paper felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Rosie stood by the hospital bed, gently leaning down to kiss Neil's lips. Sunlight streamed through the window, tiny dust particles floating in the air, creating a warm and cozy atmosphere. Her eyes were filled with love, a look of obsession I had never seen before. A pang of bitterness hit my heart, like a drowning person sinking into a dark ocean, falling deeper and deeper, unable to break free. I couldn't understand why, if Rosie still loved her white moonlight, she had pursued me so actively before. Once I realized Rosie had someone she liked, I had already pulled back my feelings, retreating to the role of childhood friend, deciding to slowly let her go. It was Rosie who had given me a gift on my birthday and then confessed her feelings, sweetly saying, "Calvin Joan, I've fallen for you. Can you give me a chance to pursue you?" But now I wanted a divorce. From Rosie Evans. Half a month later, Rosie finally returned home. She reeked of alcohol, her eyes hazy and unfocused, her face flushed. She casually changed her shoes and sat on the sofa, only noticing me walking out of the study to drink water. "Aren't you asleep yet?" During this time, I had filled my days with work to avoid thinking about Rosie and falling into despair. "Calvin Joan, my head hurts so much from drinking. Neil is too gentle and easy to talk to. He doesn't know how to refuse when people urge him to drink. I had to help him fend off drinks. Can you give me a massage?" Tonight, Rosie had taken Neil to a dinner party under the guise of the Evans family's young lady, helping him secure drama resources. I stood frozen, not moving for a long time. Rosie Evans opened her eyes while lying on the sofa, her pretty face full of impatience. "Calvin Joan, I've only been gone for a few days, and you're already giving me the cold shoulder. Don't believe what those gossip media say. Neil and I are a thing of the past. He's not having an easy time right now, and everyone is kicking him when he's down, so I'm just helping him out a bit. We did have a relationship, but I can assure you, there's nothing more between us. Don't be angry, okay? Calvin?" Her tone softened. "Do you still love Neil Williams?" I asked her softly. Rosie's expression changed, and she accused me loudly. "What's happened to you? You have no sympathy at all. He's struggling abroad, and Neil and I are innocent. Don't think too much." She avoided the question. "We grew up together. I know her well." It was easy to see that she was flustered, afraid I would discover her true feelings. She still loves Neil. A wave of bitterness surged in my heart, bringing an unprecedented fatigue. "Let's get a divorce," I said seriously. Rosie looked at me in shock, then angrily slammed the door and left. "Don't joke around like this. Don't threaten me. That won't work on me. Calm down and apologize to me, and we can reconcile. I can still forgive you." She made a firm statement. Rosie was still convinced that I loved her deeply and wouldn't want to part with her. Less than an hour after she left, I received a strange text message on my phone. "Rosie is tired. She was just calling my name." In the photo, Rosie had tear stains on her face, lying under a man's arm, with noticeable red marks on her skin that weren't covered by a blanket. The marks were ambiguous. It was clear that she was wearing nothing under the covers. Is this what she calls being innocent? She just left home and ended up in bed with Neil? I felt a wave of nausea and rushed to the bathroom to retch. Neil's messages kept coming. "Even if I give you 3 years, Rosie Evans still won't love you. The one she likes has always been me. Mr. Joan, you're really useless. Now that I'm back, it's time for you to give her back to me." The man in the mirror looked pale, his eyes hollow and despairing. I expressionlessly typed, "Oh, removing the time Rosie spent on the road. I see you're really not that capable. It's only been a few minutes, you're young, and you're already like this. You need to take care of yourself." Neil was furious and stopped replying me. I lowered my eyes, my heart only hurting a little. From that day on, Rosie and I fell into a cold war. She stopped coming home and spent every day filming on set. Because of the half-month she spent caring for Neil in the hospital, the progress was affected, and Rosie was rushing to finish her scenes. Neil successfully entered the same production, taking over the male lead role thanks to Rosie's connections. That fat director who had disrespected Neil that day was ignored by Rosie's pleas and was replaced by a new director who listened to her. The two of them were together day and night on set. Their rekindled romance kept trending online. Everyone in the world thought they were back together. I felt like I was being cheated on. Neil frequently posted about Rosie on his Weibo. They took morning walks together, posting pictures of the sunrise. They had lunch in a trailer with Rosie's homemade bento box. At night, they watched fireworks by the river. They looked like a sweet couple in love. I had my assistant save all this information. He looked at me with concern. Everyone around knew how much I liked Rosie. We grew up together. In our youth, I quietly kept her in my heart. No matter how busy I was with work, I would always make time to cook for her and even learn to make dishes she liked. Whenever I saw pretty jewelry or dresses, my first thought was to buy them for her. But actually, slowly letting go of someone isn't that hard. Long before Rosie and I had that fight, when she left home not long after climbing into Neil's bed, I realized my love for her was gradually wearing away. "I'm fine, really." I smiled at my assistant. "Keep these things safe. They'll be useful in the future." Rosie had been waiting for me to comfort her. Just like during the 2 years we dated and married, she often threw these little tantrums, needing me to spoil her and protect her. I could do that before, but now I didn't want to comfort her anymore. So I hadn't contacted Rosie at all. Until our first wedding anniversary, I still didn't make any gesture. She was acting intimately with Neil on set while I was busy expanding the company's new production line. Maybe she was trying to show me. Clips of Rosie hugging Neil on set were released, their poses intimate and natural, with the surrounding staff as their backdrop. Fans were asking me when I would be willing to support this couple, even rushing into my Weibo to insult me. "They're a natural pair. Why are you getting in the way? If you weren't Rosie Evans' childhood friend, what right do you have to replace Neil and marry her? Go die, go die. If you die, my ship can reunite." That night, a trending topic shot to the top. The paparazzi live-streamed the news. We followed Rosie Evans for 3 days, and the day before yesterday, she was seen hand in hand with Neil Williams entering a hotel, suspected to have already reconciled. Sweet as honey. The comments below were lively. "No way, really cheating? Rosie Evans, are you confused? Your brother-in-law is such a good person. Well, respect and bless. Let's wish for a lock-in." "No way. Am I the only one who has a memory about the Williams family?" Everyone thought I was madly in love with Rosie, even with a big green grassland on my head. Even so, I remained silent to save her face. They didn't know that long before the public opinion started to ferment, I had already sent Rosie a divorce agreement. When I sent the divorce agreement, I looked at the packaged express delivery and suddenly remembered the time before Neil came back, when Rosie and I were still sweet as honey. She curiously asked me, "Calvin, what gift are you going to give me for our first wedding anniversary?" "I want a big surprise." I thought how considerate I was. This gift was exactly what she needed now. The express delivery showed it had been signed for long ago, but Rosie hadn't responded. The lawyer informed me of the results from his communication with Rosie's side. She was unwilling to divorce. Months later, she took the initiative to call me. Her voice was hoarse, filled with crying and panic. "I don't agree to the divorce. Calvin Joan, I realized I really love you. I don't need you to apologize or console me. Can we get back together? Okay?" I wanted a divorce, but Rosie was unwilling. For this reason, she even went to my parents' house to find them. My parents had watched her grow up and treated her almost like their own daughter. On the day they found out we were getting married, my parents seriously told me to take good care of Rosie Evans and not to let her down, or they would break my legs. Rosie thought that if she went to find my parents, they would definitely persuade me to reconcile with her. And since I was so filial, as long as the elders advised me, I surely wouldn't divorce. But she didn't expect. She didn't even make it through my front door. Standing outside in thin costume in the cold wind for half an hour, it was only after the nanny, who had watched her grow up, finally opened the door with a look of disgust. Mr. Joan and Mrs. Joan don't want to see you and know what you're thinking. Please go back. Rosie's face turned pale, her figure swaying in the biting autumn wind. She couldn't believe. Why wouldn't my parents want to see me? I'm their daughter-in-law. The nanny had always greeted her with a smile before, but now her face was expressionless. Very soon you won't be. Sir said he supports all of young master's decisions. Rosie felt as if she had been seen through by the nanny's gaze, her thoughts exposed with nowhere to hide. She forced a smile. Then I'll come back to see my parents after a while. The nanny didn't respond, turning around to close the door. This was an unprecedented cold attitude from the Joan family. She vaguely felt that the development of events was slipping out of her control. Rosie's face was pale, tightly gripping her manager's hand, mumbling, "He loves me. How could he bear to divorce me?" The manager helplessly said, "I advised you before to be careful, but you wouldn't listen." "I don't believe it. I'm going to find him." She kept shaking her head. Long before Rosie Evans left me for Neil Williams for the first time, I had returned home. I told her about having feelings for someone else. The records saved by my assistant came in handy, and I showed them to my parents one by one. "Mom and Dad, I want to divorce Rosie Evans, and I hope you will support me." They liked Rosie. It was based on her growing up alongside me and later being my wife. In the photos on the table, they were in close poses, clearly affectionate. Mom glanced at them, looking at me with concern. "It must hurt, son. Mom knows you like Rosie, but now Mom supports all your decisions." "Okay. Thank you, Mom and Dad." I had been waiting for a suitable opportunity to bring up the divorce, but I didn't expect the opportunity to come so quickly. Rosie, trying to make me jealous, bribed the paparazzi to leak information. She thought I would be sad, compromise, and then accept that she would selflessly help her white moonlight. She didn't know that if it were the old me, I would indeed be sad about it. But the current me, upon seeing the public opinion just starting to brew, had already paid to buy traffic, pushing the gossip to become even more heated. Rosie Evans asked me to meet. In the company's conference room, she looked sorrowful. "I don't want a divorce. Can you listen to my explanation?" I was focused on the new project documents, and hearing her words, I nodded noncommittally. "Neil is having a hard time abroad because of his family issues." She hesitated as she spoke. "After returning to the country, he is also being boycotted by netizens, so I want to help him a little more. But between him and me, we are absolutely innocent." I interrupted her. "Have you noticed something? Every time you call Neil Williams, it's always Neil, but you always call me by my full name. Is it really that hard for you to admit you still love him? You say you love me, but what have you done to show that love? When I was sick, you didn't stay overnight in the hospital to take care of me, nor did you worry about my feelings all the time. Does the person who truly loves someone not feel that love? Just like Neil Williams. He knows Rosie loves her, so even though he provokes me again and again, Rosie never gets angry. She wanted to argue but found no reason to. She could only open her mouth. It's not like that. I love you. I don't like Neil Williams. I only have past feelings for him. A loud thud came from the entrance as something heavy fell to the ground. Neil looked pale as he stared at Rosie, disbelief written all over his face. His phone lay on the carpet. What are you doing here? Rosie hurriedly got up. How disgusting. She says she doesn't love him, that she loves me, but her subconscious actions show nothing but concern and nervousness. I felt even angrier. If she loves him, then why confess to me? I informed you. I calmly looked at the anxious expression on Rosie's face. Everything Neil did upon returning was to cling to her. After learning I was willing to divorce, he rushed over without a second thought, following the time and address I provided. At this moment, he nervously gazed at Rosie, tears shimmering in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks. Do you not love me anymore? I could only sigh. Truly, he was an actor, but he just didn't put that talent into his craft. I know I hurt your heart by suddenly going abroad, but you don't know what kind of difficult days I went through overseas." His voice choked. "I longed day and night to return home to see you. Even after coming back and finding out you were married, I still abandoned all my dignity. Rosie, do you really not love me anymore?" He swayed on his feet, as if he would collapse the moment Rosie nodded. A look of pain flickered in Rosie's eyes. She hesitated. Her lips moved but remained silent. Neil covered his face, tears dripping through his fingers onto the carpet. "If I had known, I wouldn't have come back." He pointed at me. "Do you think he loves you?" "He doesn't love you anymore." I nodded and said, "Right, I don't love you anymore." Rosie stared at me, trying to find signs of jealousy on my face, but all I felt was disgust towards her. She gritted her teeth, still unwilling to give up, and asked me, "Do you really not love me anymore?" I took several steps back, proving my point through action. Rosie forced a bitter smile, holding onto her dignity, refusing to look at me. She threw herself into Neil's arms, crying, "No, I was just teasing you. I still love you. I was with Calvin Joan just because you weren't around, and I felt bored." Neil smiled. He made a motion with his mouth. "You lost again. On the first day of winter, as the whirlwind swept in, I got divorced." Rosie finally agreed, because she was 3 months pregnant. Before, she had been too busy with filming for her belly to show, and with work being hectic, it was common for her to delay her period, so she hadn't realized it. Since Neil returned to the country, we hadn't been intimate at all. The child was Neil's. Later, I learned that the day Neil appeared on set, they had already been involved at the hospital. Not to mention being together day and night on set. It was only natural they couldn't resist each other. She left with nothing. After learning Rosie was pregnant, the Evans family felt too embarrassed to bring up dividing assets and even offered to compensate me instead. I didn't refuse, I accepted it all, because it was truly disgusting. After hearing about Rosie's pregnancy, I felt like I had swallowed a fly. After receiving the divorce certificate, I turned to leave without a backward glance. Rosie called out to me, her eyes slightly red. "Do you not even want to look at me now? Right, you've already cheated on me and slept with Neil. I find you disgusting." Behind me, Rosie couldn't hold back her sobs. I thought, what is there to cry about now? There will be plenty of times to cry later. As soon as I returned to the company, the public relations department had already released the news of my divorce. It stirred up a storm. Rosie was a well-known actress, and Neil's controversial fame was also significant. Our relationship had been under the spotlight for a while. At the peak of attention, the company launched the latest product, which was the project I had been busy with during this time. Passers-by gathered to watch, providing free advertising and gaining huge traffic. Once the product was launched, I made a fortune. As I said before, I didn't love her anymore, so I naturally had to maximize my benefits. The timing of my divorce was perfect, just as the rumors of Rosie and Neil spending the night in a hotel surfaced. Everyone could see the reason for our divorce, which was enough to keep her on the shame pedestal forever. Which ex-husband would help his ex-wife cover up her infidelity? I'm not that magnanimous. The worst part is that some media captured my conversation with Rosie Evans at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau and posted it online. Since her debut, Rosie has had the Evans family backing her, and with her decent acting skills, her reputation has always been good. But now, the whole world knows she cheated on Neil Williams, whose family is notorious for their unscrupulousness. The Evans family, pressured by my relationship, won't help her with public relations either. Her reputation has plummeted, and even her rational fans have mostly abandoned her. Come on. You really are hungry. Mr. Joan is such a good person. I thought you were smart, but I didn't expect you to be so foolish, mistaking fish eyes for pearls. You're just buying a box to sell the pearls. Adding to the internet's black history, following you was the worst decision of my life. Only a few die-hard fans are still speaking up for her, but they are quickly drowned out by the public's criticism. Her acting career is practically over. along with the drama she filmed with Neil. It's all gone down the drain and won't rise again. After finishing up with company matters, I took an extended vacation to travel. It was originally planned with Rosie, a city we were supposed to visit together. But honestly, I can enjoy it alone too. I'm having a great time, redirecting the energy I used to spend on Rosie back to myself. I feel like my next health checkup will show significant improvement. Just as I returned home and hadn't even put my luggage down, I received a call from Neil. What on earth did you do? Does she know something? Why is Rosie so cold towards me? I asked her to marry me, but she refused. She's looking for excuses to avoid it, yet she's already pregnant with my child. The anxious male voice on the other end yelled in frustration. She must not love me anymore, and she's not helping me get resources? You must have done something. It seems that during this time, Neil and Rosie have both been struggling, and their feelings for each other have diminished significantly. Seeing them struggle makes me feel a sense of comfort. After letting go of my feelings for Rosie, I can say I'm the person in this world who wishes for their downfall the most. Next are the fans of our former couple, unfollowing and striking back the most genuine feelings. I didn't do anything. Just look. Haven't you offended too many people? That's why things are tough for you. The overweight director from the last film has been in the entertainment industry for years, with resources and connections. After being slapped by Rosie, he was inexplicably kicked out of the crew. Previously, due to my relationship with the Evans family, he endured it, but clearly, after the divorce, neither family is protecting her anymore, and the director has declared he will no longer work with Rosie. There's also the innocent male lead who was replaced because Neil wanted to play that role. He had prepared hard for a year and had already been filming for 3 months when Rosie used her connections to get him replaced. His fans are heartbroken and are chasing after Rosie and Neil to criticize them. Evil deeds always lead to self-destruction. Hidden beneath the glamorous facade, there are signs of significant decay. I hung up the phone. During my travels, I didn't pay attention to what was happening online. When I checked the trending news, I saw the report about Rosie and Neil arguing. In the video, Neil was asking Rosie for money, but she didn't give it. Most of her savings over the years had gone to compensate brand penalties, and the Evans family was unwilling to give her money now. Wanting to teach her a lesson, she was struggling too. Rosie's pregnancy was already quite obvious, and she looked at him angrily. How did you become like this? Didn't you say you missed me and came back for me? Rosie finally noticed something was off about her white moonlight and raised her doubts. They had a big fight in a cafe. Then their couple fans, seeing the main characters argue multiple times over a short period, became frustrated too. Coupled with their disadvantage in numbers, they were also mercilessly criticized by passers-by and began to unfollow her. Rosie tried to contact me, but I had already blocked her number. She called from a new phone number, and as soon as I recognized her voice, I hung up and added that number to my blacklist. Soon, she had no energy left to contact me. Because Neil's past abroad was dug up, it was shared by their unfollowing couple fans. A PowerPoint presentation over 100 pages long instantly caused a sensation online. The gossiping public was excited, as no one expected this farce would have more drama. Neil's life abroad wasn't at all as he had told Rosie, where he missed her day and night and thought about their reunion. On the contrary, he was living a carefree life filled with indulgence. Before his parents went to prison, they left him a substantial sum of money. He was living extravagantly abroad. During the day, he was racing cars with friends, and at night, he was hanging out in all sorts of thrilling venues with his party buddies. His romantic entanglements were particularly chaotic. The PowerPoint also contained numerous photos of him getting cozy outdoors, with people of both genders entwined together. The scale of it was shocking. He had also been led astray by his friends, getting involved with things he shouldn't have, and after becoming addicted, his spending skyrocketed. I suddenly remembered that after Rosie left home last time, she went to find him, and the matter of them sleeping together ended in such a short time. It turned out to be nothing but a false hope. Soon, The money his parents left him, enough to last a lifetime, was squandered away. After running out of money, he suddenly remembered his ex-girlfriend who stayed in the country. Rosie loved him so much, she would definitely give him money to spend. He returned to the country and successfully pushed me aside, rekindling his relationship with Rosie. But he never expected that Rosie had no money to give him anymore, and the Evans family began to abandon her. After the PPT incident was exposed, Neil was criticized and trended online. Really? Heartless second-generation rich kid. Is this how you squander the money we worked so hard for? Heartless Williams family member. Get out of the entertainment industry. What right do you have to show up, running abroad with the sweat and blood of migrant workers, and still have the face to come back and make money? He was scolded by the entire internet. I quietly had my secretary add fuel to the fire by spending money to buy exposure. After this incident was exposed, even Rosie, along with the Evans family supporting her, was boycotted. Because when Neil first returned, he was also boycotted and couldn't get any resources at all. It was Rosie who used the Evans family's connections to negotiate one collaboration after another for him. Mr. and Mrs. Evans had a business marriage. Their feelings were indifferent, each having their own illegitimate children outside. And seeing the situation was not right, they quickly came out to sever ties with Rosie. At the press conference, they claimed they had cut ties with Rosie and that her affairs had nothing to do with the Evans family from now on. Rosie was abandoned by the Evans family. There was even a possibility that she would have to help Neil pay the brand's penalty for breach of contract. When Rosie called me again, I answered the phone. Calvin. Her voice was choked, hesitating to speak. I just broke up with Neil. I have completely severed ties with him. I kindly reminded her, did you go to the hospital for a checkup? Like for AIDS or something? Her crying abruptly stopped. She screamed and hung up the phone. As far as I know, Neil had been diagnosed. Not long after the PPT incident was exposed, a passerby found Neil appearing in the hospital's quarantine department, gripping a thin examination report tightly in his hand, his face pale. Everyone applauded and cheered, saying that karma was good. Rosie didn't have AIDS, but she decided to have an abortion. She didn't want to keep a child with Neil. I went to the hospital to visit Rosie after her abortion. Since the fetus was already quite large, they could only induce labor, and she hurt her body, making it very difficult for her to get pregnant again in the future. Hearing the sound of the door opening, she struggled to lift her head. When she saw it was me, tears immediately flowed down her face. Calvin. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes, and she choked up, saying, I regret it. It hurts so much. I didn't expect Neil to be such a person. I thought he was having a tough time abroad, so I wanted to help him more, but he lied to me. She hurriedly tried to grab my hand, like a drowning person desperately reaching for the last piece of driftwood. Can we get back together? From now on, I will only have you in my heart. I will never think of him again. I have always loved you, we grew up together, and I thought it was just attachment. But from now on, let's be good together. Under my disgusted gaze, she gradually stopped speaking, unable to say another word. I don't love you anymore. Since the first time you left me for Neil. I pried her fingers apart one by one. I sat down on the visitor's chair and started peeling an apple. The Evans family had completely abandoned her. Everyone was avoiding suspicion, afraid of attracting trouble. I was the only one who came to the hospital to visit her. And I think you're disgusting, Rosie. You have Neil in your heart. And while Neil was still a long way from returning, you confessed to me. I smiled sarcastically. You and Neil are the same kind of person, equally selfish. No wonder you could get together. She covered her ears, her eyes filled with disbelief that I, who had always been gentle with her, would say such things. I came to see your retribution, to see you not doing well, and that's really good. The apple was peeled, and in Rosie's hopeful gaze, I threw the apple into the trash can. Did I do something wrong from the very beginning? If Neil hadn't returned, and I hadn't helped him, would you and I still be good together, Calvin? Wouldn't we have separated? I shook my head. How could that be? You are the same kind of person, you should be locked away. This assumption would never hold. Because Rosie's nature is to eat from the bowl while looking at the pot. Her eyes were red, her expression dejected, like an old person nearing the end of life. I'm sorry. I stood up, not looking back, and said word by word, I do not forgive. You must suffer. Living in the aftermath. As I walked out of the ward, I could still hear Rosie's cries inside. It was drizzling when I came to the hospital. The rain was wet and cold. At this moment, the sky cleared, and a beautiful rainbow floated in the sky. I suddenly remembered that the year Rosie was accepted into film school, she told me, Calvin, I want to be an actress and make many beautiful movies. At that time, her eyes were shining. But later, she easily destroyed the hard work of the entire crew for one person. Rosie had changed a long time ago. The next time I saw news about Neil was on the trending topics. He had once again topped the trending list. It was still not a good thing. He was dead. After Rosie was discharged from the hospital, she disappeared without a trace. Even her parents couldn't find out where she had gone. Neil was in desperate need of money, a large sum of it. After returning to the country, he had been spending lavishly and had fallen into debt with loan sharks. Rosie had previously helped him pay it off, but with her gone completely, he couldn't find anyone and had no choice but to repay the debts himself. So he simply dove into the underworld. But he didn't expect that his face was far too recognizable. He was quickly recognized by a customer. The customer, having drunk too much, became even angrier upon seeing him. Are you trying to infect me with your illness? How cruel you are. The customer pounded his fists on him like there was no tomorrow, and Neil could only curl up like a shrimp, desperately begging for mercy. By the time the customer sobered up, Neil had already fainted on the carpet, and they hurriedly called an ambulance to take him to the hospital. Most of the injuries were superficial. For a normal person, a few days of rest would suffice. But his body was not normal. His immune system was already in chaos, and the pain was dragging his body step by step toward death. In the end, Neil still died. I suddenly recalled how Neil had provoked me when he first returned to the country. No matter what, Rosie will choose me. I am the biggest winner. Which winner would die alone in pain? Besides, who would want an ethereal love? During this time, the company's business landscape had expanded under my leadership by double. My parents said that seeing me leave the house every day, I looked radiant. Love is not a necessity. Power and money are supplements, a great tonic. With these, I have enough.